Hey, good morning, friends. As always, it is good to see you. So Stoker here, and today I'm going to outline what I refer to as the trinity of survival. Basically what that is the three primary elements or considerations that we need to take into account so that we can understand what situations we can not only survive in but thrive in, but also do some internal assessments to figure out what our weaknesses are as well. So if you want to master your field craft or develop your tactical virtue, make sure you subscribe to the channel and click that notification bell so you can stay up to date on future content. Now, I try to approach this like I do with all things by applying the fifth principle of patrolling, which is common sense. So what is the trinity of survival? You know, as in most classical theological perspectives, that word trinity, we need to understand this first. So it's three things or elements that compose one, and that one, of course, is survival. That's what we're talking about. The three things that make survival actually happen. Now, the things that I believe that enable survival to happen is gear, knowledge, and skill. Each one are separate individually. Gear is not knowledge, and knowledge is not skill, and skill is not gear. But without all three, you can't have a holistic view of what survival actually is. And so as it relates to each of us as individuals, as well as a community or even a small group, I need you to imagine that each of these areas of gear, skill, and knowledge are small circles, right? Just small circles. Now, where they interlock, that space in between where all three touch each other, these are areas where you can reasonably believe that you are not just going to survive, you can thrive. Now, I think if we took a hard, honest assessment of ourselves and the community around us, there's not a whole lot of areas where this actually can occur. We have hurricanes that hit every year. We just had one hit down in the southeast and totally destroyed homes and pushed people away and outside and killed a lot of people as well. And so, even just when the power goes out, how long can we survive until the power comes back? These are just basic things. A storm knocks out the lines. There can be minor chaos in the streets, and we have to ask ourselves honestly, if the water stopped, how am I going to survive? And so again, it's only in those areas where all three circles interlock do we have a strong chance of survival. But there's another outside layer, and that's where two areas may interlock. Maybe I have the gear and the knowledge, but I haven't had the chance to apply and enhance my skill in a particular area. So these circumstances may be where I have a strong chance of surviving for a short duration of time, maybe 3 days, maybe 7 days, maybe longer, because I'm learning skills along the way. Or maybe I have a partner with me, or I'm in a group where they can feed into and tie into those areas where I'm lacking. And so that final layer is where we only have one in our kit bag. Maybe I only have gear, but I don't have knowledge or skill. Or maybe I only have knowledge, but I lack the other two. So these are areas that I can reasonably believe that I'm not going to be able to survive for very long. So your goal and my goal needs to be to make that inner circle where all three interlock and expand that as large as we can so that we can survive and thrive in more and more areas and circumstances, as well as to take each area, the gear, the knowledge, and the skill, and to push those out, because where one is strong, I can kind of make up for the other ones as well. All right, so let's go ahead and deep dive into each element. So let's start off with gear, because it's probably everybody's favorite if we were honest with ourselves, right? Because it's tangible. It's something we can put our hands and our fingers on. We can put it in our bag. We can throw it in our truck, and we can compare it and show it off with other people. And a lot of times that's what we end up doing. We try to keep up with the Joneses, as it were. We see a friend go out and get a Benchmade knife, so we have to go out and get 2 Benchmade knives, or whatever the case is. I don't know what we do sometimes. I just think that sometimes we fool ourselves into thinking that having physical things in our lives is going to somehow enable and prepare us for excellence or to be able to survive in a particular situation. And it's kind of easy to understand why, because if we just look out at the world of technology as a whole, we kind of see where, even though we have all of these devices that keep us interconnected, digitally, through zeros and ones, it really kind of isolates and separates us from the rest of the world around us. So this is something that we need to be cognizant of and try to avoid as we move forward. And we do try to get our gear, because believe me, I love gear, man. I really do, probably just as much as you do. And I love having gear for all sorts of things. But I want to be cognizant of the fact that I don't want to buy something just to buy it. It needs to have a use and a principle. And one of the things that I would strongly encourage you to do is not go in debt when you're trying to buy your gear. You know, be smart with your purchases. You know, sometimes that means that you need to save and hold off and wait because maybe there's that Leatherman of something, right? Now, Leathermans and Gerbers are all good tools in and of themselves, but sometimes the do-it-all tool isn't going to last as long as a tool that is designed to do a specific purpose. So if that means that you need to save off and hold and buy the best that you can in a later time, do that, man, do that. Now, one of the other things you can do is look out for some fire sales. The businesses may be going out of sales, so they're selling off their equipment. You know, there's estate sale or brokers out there who are getting rid of entire homes and everything that somebody may have had in their home for pennies on the dollar. And of course, you have some local used places as well. So make sure you check these out and be frugal with your money and be smart. Right, so these next two areas are similar, but they are definitely not the same. So we're talking about skill and knowledge, and we're going to deep dive into knowledge first. All right, so knowledge is what we have up in our brain housing group, right? It's all the facts, the figures, the numbers, the statistics, the data, the colors, all this other stuff. Really, it's just all of this data that's crammed up into our brain. Now, most of us began our journey filling our gray matter, you know, through things like schools, learning from our parents, things of this nature, through some sort of institutional knowledge that gets into us. We learn from teachers and history and our friends. We read a book or even watched a video. Eventually, some of our knowledge is tested through application, and by nature we get some experiential knowledge, but most of the time it's just raw data that we have in our heads. Now, sometimes we can have so much knowledge that we can actually deceive ourselves into thinking that we're somehow inherently better than other people around us. Maybe you've known or met somebody who had this sort of mentality along the way. You know, somebody who's high and mighty with themselves, that because they have a degree, they're somehow smarter than everybody else. So just as with our gear, we have to be careful with how we're acquiring things and be smart about it, but we also need to be cognizant of the fact that just because we have more of something, it doesn't make us more than other people around us. And just like with gear, man, I love knowledge. I love learning new things and expanding the sphere of what my mind and my heart knows. But I know that as much as I know, there's somebody else out there who knows a lot more than this guy. But I do encourage you, man, learn new things and master your craft. Open up a book, watch some videos, have some discussions, go to school. Do what it takes to get more knowledge and information into you so that you can apply it and learn how to use it. And that brings us into the final area of consideration, or that final element of the trinity of survival, and that's skill. So where skill differs from knowledge is because there's motor skills that are actually required. I can know something, but that doesn't mean I can do something. And just because I can do something doesn't mean I can do it well. So we also need to be talking about how efficient we are at something as well. Some people are students and some are teachers, and this is the primary difference, right? The teacher hopefully has done, but just because you can teach doesn't mean that you can do. And just because you can do doesn't mean that you can teach. And it takes a little bit of humility to say, you know, I have the gear to do this skill and I have the knowledge to do it, but I'm just not all that great at it. But that's okay. You just need to keep continuing to work and refine your systems and your processes so that you can become better skilled at a particular topic or area. Because when we do that, it's a true sign of wisdom and inner strength. Now listen to me. Nearly everything that you could possibly think of, each individual area or topic or scenario or case that we can come up with as it relates to survival requires skills. And if you don't practice your skills, you are not going to be able to be as efficient as possible or actually be able to survive in areas, whether we're talking about first aid, fire, water, shelter, communication, any number of areas that we could come up with and talk about, and then digress and we further pinpoint these things down into what actually makes up first aid or fire or all these other areas. If you don't have the motor skills and the efficiency to be able to do or perform these tasks, you're not going to be able to make it very long. So you have to practice, man. You have to practice. And so now we kind of talked about, each individual element, skill, knowledge, and gear as it relates to survival. Let's talk about which one is actually more important than another. Is skill more important than knowledge or gear? Is gear the most important? How about knowledge? So let's take myself as an example, and we'll use some of this as it relates to woodworking and fabrication. Because in the past I've done quite a bit, man. I've built some homes, sheds. I've done a lot of woodworking. I have built some furniture, although I'm not that good at it. I've built some trains in the past. I've built a lot of jigs, all kinds of things with my hands. I have some experience or some skill in my head, but as it stands right now, I don't have that much gear with me. I just have some hand tools that are in the house. So although I have some knowledge, some limited knowledge, and I have some experience, some limited experience, I don't have the tools or the gear to actually do a lot of the things that I can and know how to do. So as it relates to this, the actual center of my trinity is kind of small right now, right? Because without the right tools that I can muster, I can't build that many things. And so I think it's safe to assume that skill is not the most important thing out there. Now let's change circles and talk about knowledge. Is knowledge the most important? And I think just like as with skill, we might agree that the answer is no, but let's further refine the answer of why I would say the answer is no. Now imagine this. Imagine that there's a guy who just comes out of college. He's been in school for 8-10 years. He's got this big fancy doctorate. He's a medical doctor, right? And he wants to tell you that he can perform brain surgery. He has all of the knowledge, so why not let him do it? Well, I can tell you what, he's not going to open up this dude's scalp without the proper experience and skill required that takes time and years before you can get to that point. So I think we can say that knowledge is definitely very important and valuable, but not the most important element out there. And so last but not least, it leaves us with gear. And like we talked about earlier, it's probably one of everybody's favorites. So is gear the most important element in the trinity of survival? Now I could go buy the biggest, baddest bug out bag in the world. I can outfit my home and my truck and all my caches with all the latest, greatest pieces of gear that's out there. Or maybe I'm a hiker. I could walk into REI and buy the most lightweight and expensive gear I could possibly think of. Man, we could have all of this gear, but if we don't know how to actually use, operate, or maintain it, it is all absolutely worthless. So I think it's safe to assume that gear is not the most important element in the trinity of survival. You see, each one is important on its own right, and we have to have at least a little bit of an area out of each one in order to be able to survive in a particular situation. You can't rely on just one. You need all three. All right, everybody, so there you go. Hope you enjoyed the content of the video. If you did, make sure you like it. And if you feel that somebody else may get something out of it as well, consider adding it to your own playlist or sharing it. Because every time you do, I'll give my dog a treat. Most importantly, leave some comments down below and let me know what you think or felt about the trinity of survival. And as always, until then, we'll see you.